The Frozen Ridge, a tale of second chances. 3 hard knocks struck Elias Thorne's cabin door, sharp and sudden, like gunshots in the night. He froze where he stood, one hand wrapped around a wooden spoon, the other steadying the small iron pot hanging over his fire. Outside, the wind screamed across the Alaskan tundra, hurling snow against the walls in thick white waves. The storm had come early that winter, mean and wild. No one climbed this mountain once the snow began to fall. No one with sense anyway. His cabin was small, built by his father's hands and held together now by his stubborn will. Since his death 2 winters ago, Elias had lived alone, fighting cold, hunger, and loneliness with the same quiet grit that had kept his father alive for 30 years on that land. The knock came again, not loud this time. Weak. Elias reached for the rifle above the mantel, but his heart pounded so hard he could feel it in her throat. The last strangers who had knocked at his door had laughed at his patched coat and the thinness of his stew before riding off into the night. But this knock did not sound proud. It sounded desperate. He stepped toward the window, wiping frost from the glass with his sleeve. Through the swirling snow, he saw a tall traveler standing against the storm. Her coat was heavy, but stiff with ice. One arm held a small girl against her chest. The child's head hung low, limp with exhaustion. Behind them, 2 horses stood bowed against the wind, ribs showing, legs trembling. The girl's lips were blue. Elias swallowed hard. His father's voice rose in his memory, firm and steady. Hospitality ain't optional in a storm. He set the rifle down and opened the door. The wind burst inside, carrying snow across his floor. The cold cut through his wool shirt like a blade. The traveler stepped forward, boots heavy with ice. Up close he saw the lines on her face, deep and worn, and eyes dark with something that went beyond fatigue. "Sir," she said. Just that one word, but it carried miles of fear and a mother's helplessness. Elias stepped aside. They entered, bringing the storm with them. He shut the door fast, and the roar outside softened to a distant howl against the logs. "By the fire," he said quickly. The woman knelt near the hearth and gently lowered the girl to the rug. Elias grabbed his only spare quilt, the one his mother had stitched before she passed, and wrapped it tightly around the child. She could not have been more than 8. Her clothes were fine, though worn from travel, and her boots were expensive leather, not the kind a drifter's child usually wore. Her hands, though frozen, were soft. "How long you been riding?" Elias asked, pouring water into his kettle. "Too long," the traveler replied, voice rough. He brewed weak coffee and ladled stew into 2 chipped bowls. The girl woke slowly as warmth reached her. Her eyes opened bright blue like summer sky. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, polite and careful in her speech. Elias felt something soften inside his chest. The girl ate with hunger. The woman barely touched her food. She watched her daughter like a person guarding treasure. Night deepened. Snow hammered the walls. Elias added another log to the fire. He felt the woman's gaze follow his movements, not with threat, but with something gentler. Gratitude, maybe. And her disbelief that kindness still lived in places like this. When the girl finally slept, the traveler stood at the window, staring into the storm. "They're not just lost," Elias realized. "They're running." Morning came pale and gray. The storm had weakened, but still held the mountain tight. Elias rose quietly and began making biscuits from the last of his flour. He added plum jam he had been saving for Christmas. The woman stood and helped without being asked. She moved with ease in his small kitchen, the way a person does who has worked hard most of their life. The girl woke and looked around the cabin. "Where are we, Em?" she asked. "Safe," the woman said softly. "For now." Elias noticed things as they ate. The horses outside were strong-boned and well-bred. Even tired, they held themselves proud. The girl's manners were careful, refined. The woman's coat, though worn, had been stitched with skill, not cheaply made. These were not ordinary drifters. "How far were you headed?" he asked. "Far enough," she answered. A pause stretched between them. "You can't ride today," Elias said firmly. "Your horses are spent." Your girl nearly froze. The woman's jaw tightened. "We could work," she said after a moment. "For our keep." Elias looked around his cabin. The barn door sagged. The fence leaned. The firewood pile was nearly gone. Since his father died, he had been fighting alone to keep the place standing. 3 days, he said. 3 days, she agreed. The girl smiled for the first time. "I'm Lily," she said brightly. "This is my mom, Sarah," the traveler added quietly. "Elias," he replied. They shook hands across his rough wooden table, and her grip was calloused but careful. He felt the warmth of it long after she let go. That afternoon, Sarah split wood with steady rhythm. Each swing of the axe echoed across the ridge. Elias stood at the window listening to that sound, a sound he had not heard since his father's axe had fallen silent. Lily gathered eggs from the coop, laughing when one hen chased her. Her laughter filled his yard like sunlight, breaking through clouds. That evening, as the sky cleared and stars appeared sharp and bright, Elias felt something he had not felt in years. His home no longer felt empty. But as he watched Sarah from across the firelight, he saw the weight in her eyes, the way she studied the horizon whenever she thought he was not looking. They were not just travelers caught in a storm. They were hiding from something, and Elias had just opened his door to it. The third morning dawned clear and sharp, the storm finally broken. Snow covered the ridge in thick white layers that sparkled under the rising sun. Smoke curled from Elias's chimney in a thin gray line. For the first time in days, the valley below was visible. The trail down the mountain could be traveled now. Elias stood at the stove stirring oats, his chest tight with a feeling he did not want to name. Outside, he heard Sarah saddling the horses. Lily's small voice carried across the yard. "Mom, do we have to go?" Elias closed his eyes. "Yes, honey," Sarah answered gently. "We can't stay where we ain't invited." The words cut deeper than they should have. Elias stepped outside, wrapping his coat tighter. The cold bit his cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. Sarah worked quietly, tightening straps, checking hooves. She did not look at him. Lily sat on the porch steps, shoulders slumped. "You're leaving," Elias said softly. "Trails are clear," Sarah replied. "We've taken enough of your kindness." "You haven't." "We have." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the struggle beneath it. Lily looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Mr. Elias, can't we stay just one more day?" Elias swallowed hard. Sarah stepped closer to her horse and ran a hand along its leg. "The shoe," Elias said suddenly. "One of them's loose." Sarah frowned and crouched down. The shoe was fine, but from where she stood, she could not see clearly. "Must have missed it," she muttered. "Better rest him another day," Elias said quickly. "Can't risk laming him." Their eyes met. She knew he was lying. He knew she knew, but after a long second, she nodded. "One more day," she said. Lily let out a small cheer and threw her arms around Elias's waist. He laughed, despite the moisture burning behind his eyes. That day felt different. They worked side by side in the kitchen. Elias showed Lily how to mix soap from ash and lye. Sarah built a small woodshed beside the cabin, strong and square. Her hands moved with purpose, as if building something lasting instead of something temporary. Evening fell golden and quiet. After supper, they stood outside beneath a sky so clear it felt close enough to touch. The Milky Way stretched above them like a river of light. "I should tell you something," Sarah said low. Elias's heart skipped. "Not tonight," he answered softly. "When you're ready." She looked at him with surprise, then something warmer. Inside, Lily called out from a bad dream. Sarah went to her quickly, her voice gentle as she calmed the girl. Elias remained on the porch, staring at the stars. He was falling for them, both of them, and he still did not know who they truly were. The next afternoon, riders appeared at the bottom of the ridge. 3 men. They rode hard and fast. Elias felt his stomach drop. Sarah saw them too. Her face changed instantly. Whatever softness had been there vanished, replaced by something hard and guarded. "Get inside," she said quietly. But it was too late. The riders reached the yard in a storm of snow and dirt. The one in front sat tall in his saddle, dressed in fine wool and polished boots. But his face carried the easy arrogance of a man who had never struggled a day in his life. "Afternoon, Elias," he called with a sharp smile. "Heard you got company." Elias stepped forward. "You can leave, Julian." Julian ignored him. His gaze slid to Sarah standing in the doorway, Lily half hidden behind her. "Well now," Julian said. "Who's this?" Sarah did not answer. Julian leaned forward in his saddle. "You know there's a pipeline coming through this territory. Your land's right in the path. I'm authorized to make you an offer." "Not for sale," Elias replied. Julian chuckled. "That's so. I also heard you're behind on payments. Shame if you lost everything your daddy built." Elias felt heat rise to his face. He had begged the banker for more time. He had stretched every dollar thin. How did Julian know? But Sarah stepped forward slightly. The movement was small, but Julian's horse shifted nervously. "What's your name?" Julian asked her sharply. "Doesn't matter," Sarah said. Julian's eyes narrowed. A person who hides their name is hiding more than that. "Get off my land," Elias snapped. Julian smirked. "Think about my offer before you lose it anyway." He turned his horse and rode off with his men, laughter trailing behind them. The yard fell silent. Elias turned to Sarah. "Tell me the truth," he demanded. Who are you? She looked at him, pain clear in her eyes. A person trying to do right, she said quietly. That's not enough. It's all I can give. The words hung heavy between them. That night, Elias lay awake, listening to the wind and to the quiet sounds of Sarah packing their few belongings before dawn. He heard Lily crying softly. We can't leave him, Mom, the girl pleaded. A person respects what's asked of them, Sarah replied, her voice breaking. Elias pressed his hand to his mouth to keep from sobbing. When morning came, he did not go outside to watch them leave. He stood at the window and listened to hoofbeats fade down the trail. And with each step they took away from his cabin, something inside him felt like it was breaking. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. If you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Elias did not remember falling to his knees, only the sound of the door closing and the silence that followed. The cabin felt empty again. Too empty. He had survived 2 winters alone after his father passed. He had endured hunger, cold, and the kind of loneliness that made a person forget their own voice. But this felt different. This felt like he had pushed away something good, because he was afraid to hold it. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Snow melted slowly from the roof, dripping steady outside his window. A knock came at the door. Elias's heart jumped. He opened it to find old Silas, his nearest neighbor from 5 miles down the ridge. He rarely visited anyone. You sent them away, he said quietly. Elias nodded. Silas stepped inside without waiting to be invited. You know who that woman is? He shook his head. Sarah Van Sterling, Silas said. Only daughter of the Sterling shipping empire, richest family in 3 territories. Elias felt the floor tilt beneath him. Sterling, he whispered. Silas nodded. Her husband died last year. Folks say she walked away from the company not long after, took the girl and disappeared. Julian found out she was in town. Plans to expose her in the square tonight. Drag her back to that life. Use her to push that pipeline through whether folks like it or not. When? Elias asked. He was already reaching for his coat. The ride down the mountain was wild and dangerous. Ice hid beneath fresh snow. His mare nearly slipped twice on the narrow turns. Wind cut at his face and stole his breath, but he did not slow down. He saw Lily's tear-streaked face in his mind. Heard Sarah's quiet voice. We can't leave him. The town came into view just as darkness fell. The lanterns flickered along the main street. A crowd had gathered in the square. Julian stood on the porch of the hotel, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. There she is, Julian announced. Sarah Sterling. Hiding like a common drifter. Sarah stood below, straight and silent. Lily clung to her side. Elias rode straight through the crowd. People scattered as he pulled his horse to a stop in the center of the square. Every eye turned to him. He dismounted, legs shaking, but steady enough to carry him forward. That poor man's here to defend her, Julian sneered. Elias stepped between Julian and Sarah. Call me poor, he said loudly. I gave shelter in a storm. What have you given but threats? A murmur moved through the crowd. She lied to you, Julian shot back. She fixed my fence, Elias replied. She chopped my firewood. She treated me like I mattered. If that's lying, I'll take it. Sarah stepped forward. I hid my name, she said firmly. But I didn't hide my work. Julian laughed sharply. You're still behind on your banknotes, Elias. Tomorrow, that land won't be yours. Sarah reached into her coat and pulled out folded papers. Already settled, she said calmly. Bought his debt before I left this morning. Deed's clear. Gasps filled the square. Elias stared at her. She had paid his debt, even after he told her to leave. You can't buy decency, Julian spat. I didn't buy it, Sarah answered. I found it in a cabin on a mountain. Julian's confidence cracked. He looked around and saw no support left in the crowd. Slowly he turned and walked away. Silence followed. Sarah looked at Elias. The land's yours, she said quietly. I only wanted you free. And you? He asked softly. Are you free? Before she could answer, Lily slipped her small hands into both of theirs. Can we go home now? She asked. The word hit Elias like sunlight after winter. Home. He looked at Sarah. She looked back at him, uncertainty in her eyes. Yes, Elias said gently. Let's go home. Spring arrived late that year, but when it did, it came strong. Wildflowers covered the ridge in color. The snow melted into clear streams. The cabin no longer stood lonely against the sky. Sarah built a second room onto the house. She repaired the barn properly and fenced the garden with straight posts that would last for decades. Everywhere Elias looked, he saw proof that she was staying. Lily's laughter echoed across the yard each morning, and she grew taller, stronger, happier. They married in early summer, a simple ceremony with Silas as witness and the mountains as their church. Elias wore his father's best vest, Sarah wore her mother's dress. Lily stood proud beside them. The cabin that once held only silence now held life. Months later, as autumn painted the ridge gold again, Elias stood at the doorway, watching Sarah teach Lily how to mend a fence. He rested a hand on her shoulder as she turned to him. The winter would be warm this year. A full circle from the night, 3 desperate knocks had changed everything. Sarah came up to him, wrapping her arms around him carefully. "You ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Walking away from all that wealth?" She smiled up at him. "I didn't walk away from wealth," she said. "I found the real kind." Lily ran toward them, holding a wild rose she had picked from the ridge. "For the best dad on the mountain," she declared proudly. Elias laughed and pulled them both close. The wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Smoke rose steady from their chimney. The storm that once brought strangers to his door had given him something he never knew he needed. He had opened his home to a tired traveler and her grieving daughter. And somewhere between the firewood and the fences, between truth and trust, they had stopped being strangers. They had become family. And this time, when the wind knocked against his door, Elias did not feel afraid. He felt grateful because he knew exactly who stood inside his home, and he knew he would never be alone. If this story touched your heart, please remember to share, like, and subscribe for more emotional tales from the Ridge.
Some stories entertain you, but some stories stay with you. If this one made you feel something, that's not by accident.